Welcome to the Mold Matters podcast. Whether you are looking for help recovering from mold illness or just want to learn more about creating a safe environment for your family, this podcast is the place for you.
Welcome to the Mold Matters podcast. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Evans, and I'm here with co-host Mike.
Hi, Jer.
How are you?
I am considering it's terrible weather, and
you had strep.
I had strep. And cold on top of that,
and pretty much everyone we know been sick.
I was in the hospital yesterday with my wife. In fact, yeah.
And even people we call on the phone for business,
everybody
sick or everybody or their wife or something. This has been the worst winter I can remember as far as sickness goes around.
It's been bad.
So it's been a good one, but glad to see you're healthy and back here in the office. We're going to do a little podcast for our listeners today, and we've brought a guest back who cast actually back in 2022. So it's been a while. Cheryl Ciecko. We met her at the Shoemaker Sears X convention in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 2022. Presentation on just essentially it was looking at the house, the envelope of the house, and she was pointing out a lot of overlooked issues that can contribute to mold. And Brand there noticed, we were like, wow, she's good, man. She knows. There were several things I had never even considered when thinking of troubleshooting a water issue or a mold issue. So we talked to her afterwards, and she came to our own convention, and then we had her on the podcast. So anyways, Cheryl is a licensed architect. Welcome back. First of all, thanks, Cheryl.
Well, thanks so much for having me again. You guys are always a pleasure to talk to, and I love what you're doing. So I'm happy to be part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're very glad to have you part of it too. And I know you have a very extensive background. And actually, before we get into the topic today, would you please give us a little bit of just introduction of your background with mold and how you got into it?
Yeah, so I'm in that category of life leads you where you need to go. So I'm a licensed architect and have been for over 30 years, and have done a lot of different kinds of architecture. I even had a stint where I worked for the wood industry. So I ended up being their specialist related to moisture. But the reason why is because the moisture in a building toxin thing happened to me. So, and my story is really that I went to a continuing education program on mold in commercial buildings. And at the same time, one of my children, who was 10 at the time, was having some health issues and had full-on asthma, inhalers at home and in school. And they were struggling with migraines at age 10. And really becoming more and more sick. And I go to this continuing education program, not knowing that it's at all related to what's going on in my family, and walked away with this understanding that you could have mold growing in your ducts, your metal ducts. Like, mold doesn't grow on metal. What's this about? And so it had never occurred to me. We were in a house that we were living in somewhat temporarily. Actually, it ended up being like 5 years. But I had inspected it before we bought it, and there was nothing outrageous to look for in terms of the structure. It didn't even occur to me to remove a cover vent, one of the vents over the duct, the ductwork.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me. So I came home from that presentation and immediately opened a duct, took a cover off, and was horrified. So I have in a presentation that I do on duct cleaning, I have that picture in there, and then my story and my kids are in it, because what ended up happening was that I researched and I called people's references or whatever for duct cleaners, and I hired someone who I thought was, good, and they had certification and all this. They turned out to be a complete scam. So I was smart enough to know, but I don't think the people who I called about the references were. I noticed they were working really fast. They were keeping me talking. And I just got the impression that they weren't actually cleaning all the ducts that they had opened. It was way too much talking going on. And so it's kind of for me, I would call it my mom radar, I'm being I'm being scammed here.
Yeah.
Something's not right. And so I asked him to open a vent that they had closed because they were done. And I put my arm down the vent and I pulled out a wad of yuck. And I basically caught them because they were done, supposedly. And I said, you guys could just leave. And they did pull all their stuff out, blew dust all over my house. They hadn't been doing the process properly to begin with. So it was never going to be effective. And, and then they left, and then I had to start my journey of, okay, well, I guess I have to figure out how to clean ducts so I can find someone who's going to do it and know that they're doing it the right way. And so that's really how I come to, that was my kind of circuitous route. So that was like almost 20 years ago that happened. And so I can tell you, professionals, architects, I didn't know that you could have mold growing in your ducts. And then it took about a year. I did find someone that was good. I had to go back to my colleagues that were professionals doing this in commercial buildings, and then try to find someone that was really recommended and figure out what was wrong. And so I ended up hiring him, and he's worked for me several times, and he comes on in a video that I have on my website on duct cleaning to talk about it. But I was on top of him the whole time. So why do you do that? Why do you do that?
Yeah.
And really, really trying to learn as much as I could about duct cleaning. But this was before I even knew mold was an issue in my family either. So that's the beginning of there's problem in my house.
Okay. So that was the beginning of even your mold journey was through ducting.
Yeah. Through mold in the ducts. Mm-hmm.
Well, that is a perfect introduction to, because we want to talk about ducting today, because we should actually, I got this question yesterday from our friend that we're working with here in Layton. Yeah, we get the question all the time. Should I get my ducts cleaned?
And when they say, should we get our ducts cleaned? I say, I've seen the commercial where they take the duct and they put Dawn detergent on it
And clean the duct?
So I'm good.
Don't use duct tape.
Don't use duct tape. No.
And we, I guess I'm glad to have you here, because I think you'll help me form my opinion, Cheryl, because I often don't know, because, well, I guess I often didn't hear.
I tell you what I say. and if there's any duct cleaning people out there that do quality work, this is not to disparage you at all. I'm sure there are good duct cleaners, but in 20 years being in this industry, I've yet a customer to me, wow, we're so glad we got our ducts cleaned. It's been so much better. I've yet to meet that person.
Like they feel better after.
Yeah. So I've always been kind of, I don't know.
Well, and I will say, a lot of people, there's no visible signs of molting. You pull off the registers, there's nothing visible. I think there's a little bit of a paranoia that possibly there's massive mold growth, and I just can't see it. And that is possible, but I do think often, and maybe we can talk about how to do better, but anyways, tell us what you've learned. I want to know. Obviously there's the scam part of it, and I didn't even think of that. People, I guess that makes sense. I've heard of that, actually. People come.
Yeah, because I would say, so one, now you do know someone whose family did get better when all we did was have the ducts cleaned. However, not the first time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I learned how ducts should be cleaned and found someone that was really good, we wouldn't have gotten better with the people that we originally hired. And as I said, I must have talked to 5 references for them.
Yeah.
And, people were so happy. They did a great job. But they actually didn't know. Yeah. And so I think it's like a lot of fields, even the remediation field, where in a lot of states, if not most, for duct cleaning, for sure, there's no regulation around this.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can have somebody do it well, or you can have someone do it poorly. And that doesn't mean that the thing is not going to be helpful for you. If you have your ducts cleaned poorly, like I did have, then actually we were worse, because they had thrown dust all over the house because they didn't do it right. And they missed some very, very important precautionary steps. And I have people saying, I don't want to clean my ducts because I heard you can make it worse.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like saying my arm is broken and I don't want to go to the doctor because it could be, the doctor could be an idiot and make it worse. I do know someone who, with a broken arm, who died in surgery, a woman my age.
Wow.
So should she not have had her arm gone, for surgery for her broken arm? No, the problem was a medical defect, some medical mistake. And so in that case, hopefully it was a mistake. In these other cases, I think people don't know what they don't know. Or in my case, I think they knew what they were not doing. They had the cameras and everything. So you make you feel really comfortable up front that look at how clean this is. I honestly don't know if what was on that camera was a tape.
Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
Just play
and there is, and I will let you know if you haven't seen it. So there, back in the day when 20 minutes was a thing on TV and they would do all this, actually some really good investigative reporting, there is, and I don't know if it's still out there because stuff keeps disappearing on the internet, but there was a series that they had done on scams from duct cleaners on 2020, where they had actually had secret camera. They had somebody come in and there's these older people, and then they figured it out that they didn't even like cut a hole where they pretended like they cut a hole.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I think that is the first challenge, is that we're trying to decide if that thing is good or bad. When if it's done poorly, then I wouldn't buy, it's not good. You're going to lose your money and you could get worse. However, if it's done well, and the reason why I think it's important is that we do have dust in our air. Everybody does. You can see it when the sunlight shines through your window. And that's why it's important to change our filters on our furnaces and whatnot. Yeah. But that dust is, if you know what that dust is, and you hopefully nobody's eating while they're watching this. I'm going to give you a caution right now. If you are, you may not want to be eating while I tell you what dust is, but it's basically dust mites, the fecal matter of dust mites, and their carcasses, and then hair and other fibers from your carpeting or dead skin cells. Yeah. I mean, a lot of lovely stuff that we really, if you look at under a microscope, you'd be totally disgusted. You just look up a picture of a dust mite online.
Yeah, they look creepy.
Yeah. It's a really disgusting little animal that does feed on skin cells.
Yeah.
And then they die. And they, and they have all these other bodily functions. And because you can't see it, doesn't mean that it isn't toxic to you, and that has nothing to do with mold.
Yeah.
So that alone is not healthy. So and I do have another situation where my in-laws, who have since passed away, their ducts had gotten so dirty that the ducts were actually not moving as much air. And so my father-in-law, and his effort to do the right thing, actually kept buying thinner and thinner filters. Like
more airflow.
Yeah, to have more airflow, because he felt like he wasn't getting a good airflow, and my mother-in-law is not feeling cool enough in the summer. And so, I mean, you could read a newspaper through these filters he was buying. And so in the end, his ducts were actually almost completely clogged because so much dirt was going through the filter that was hitting other dirt and debris in the ducts. And so this is like a 40-year-old house that had never had ducts cleaned.
So we're talking
had
like
animals and carpeting and
we're talking regular size, like metal ducting or
yeah. So the duct cleaner that did come said it was the worst he'd ever seen.
Okay, I was going to say
that they were actually, there was so much in there, but that was partly probably because my father, when it was starting to feel like there wasn't enough. So every time you do an elbow, and so you guys probably see a lot of ducts, and especially today. In our new construction, have you ever seen these like spider snakes of ducts that are making U-turns? Okay, so are you going to collect dust in there?
The joints, the turns,
because there's not going to be fast air movement through a bunch of bends.
Yeah,
and more, we're not designing our buildings with the duct in mind and the HVAC in mind, and so this is an afterthought, and those are not even cleanable. So flex duct I wouldn't even clean. I just replace them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've identified, obviously there's lots of dust. It gets in there. In fact, we dissected an ERV a couple weeks ago that had a decent amount of dust in there. But I think
Really?
yeah,
Actually, and a significant.
yeah, we swabbed. It was pretty bad, and
It was moldy?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
dust.
I'm
We
going to need
swabbed-
this clip because
Yeah. It's,
I think I think it's one of those ERVs and HRVs are one of those problems that's going to be, it's coming. It is a
I
problem.
agree.
Totally agree.
We absolutely
We
agree.
think we're on the house because I don't know, we've spent a lot of time on this house. We're in the negative as far as money goes, but we finally were like, we
There's
just kept
something
some at the
odd, yeah.
HVAC, and finally we just started pulling apart the E with their permission and swapped like crazy, and all of them had real holds in there. Aspergillus, versicolor, fusarium was
Yeah.
in that one.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, so that's another topic, but
Yeah, no, but I did swab my ducts too. So in my house, I mean, they looked horrific, but I did pay for like a mold inspector to come and swab the ducts, and he came back and of course you're just doing a couple spots, and he said, oh, it's only like 14% Aspergillus penicillin, but I'm thinking my daughter's 10, she's very sick, and when I'm researching Aspergillus penicillium, health effects, that if you get enough of it, you can die.
Yeah.
And so
the other hard thing
think
about doing a swab
14%
test
is too much.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it really doesn't quantify anything,
Yeah.
when you just do a small swab test. It's gotta be real
Right.
careful.
That
Real
was his
careful.
body swabbed. Who
Yeah.
knows where else it was worse?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll go. Let's go into testing later, but I want to jump right into what are the bad practices and what are the good practices in ducting, and I want to hear what you've learned on your journey.
Okay, so there's a couple. I have to think back on this a little bit. I have cleaned other ducts since, because new construction are also often really contaminated. So that would be another thing to check. So new construction, they're running the HVAC while they're doing drywall work.
Yeah.
And so that sanding dust has silica in it. There is a disease called silicosis, which is if you get that in your lungs. However, the OSHA is only protecting the workers from being exposed to that. So imagine that you have all that silica dust in your duct motor and everything, and then you and your children are going to breathe that for the next 10 years. So maybe not in as intense a way, but for a long period of time, I would argue that it might be similar.
Yeah.
So it's not just older buildings, but new ones too. And it's not just mold that we're looking for in dust. It can be the new construction dust.
Right.
So the best practices that I would say, if I start with that one on new construction, is that I wouldn't allow anybody to ever run my HVAC equipment during construction. And that needs to be part of the contract at the beginning. So I'm buying a new house.
Really
I
smart,
expect to have new equipment.
And they can bring in portable heater.
Yeah, they can do portable heating. They can, in Florida, they do portable cooling all the time. It's not as efficient. I mean, they're bringing there's ductwork in Florida. You'll see the big unit outside with these giant ducts going in through the windows, but they do often need it for drying. But what I can tell you is every furnace manufacturer warranty will disclaim the warranty if it's been used during construction. However, this is the fun fact that I figured out, was that because I had a new construction $4 million house it didn't even work. It was so caked with silica. And the furnace company was more beholden to the builders, and then it was going to be to hold the builder accountable. So it's like who feeds you? The person buying the furnace is the builder, and if he's screwing up and doing it during construction, the last person is going to hold him accountable and say, oh well, maybe it could be clean. So they came back and said, oh well, maybe it's not that bad, we'll still cover it. But think about something that silica's a rock and it's in your motors. So number one, during construction or during renovations, you just pay extra. You're going to pay extra for it. I paid extra for it. We're not running my equipment, my mechanical equipment during construction, whether it's remediation, whether it's construction. Remediation, usually you can just turn it off for that amount of time. But that would be number one. Number two, in the process, when you hire duct cleaners, they have to make sure that they're creating a vacuum. So they're going to be cleaning these ducts, but it's just like if you have a vacuum cleaner hose with a bunch of holes in it, like there's no suction.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're using suction equipment to suck the stuff out of your ducts. And if you don't make sure, and they're often, and I've had them, even I've hired them and I know better, and I'm standing over them saying, no, I think you need to close that. You need to close all the ducts. And we end up with these weird places like under cabinets or something where where it's really hard for them to close them off. And oftentimes they're not completely closing them off, even if you ask them to. But as much as possible, you want to close all the other holes so the suction actually works.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the suction equipment, in a single family house, you would always want to have the guy with the truck outside.
Truck mount.
That's a huge, that's a big vacuum when it's in his truck.
Yeah.
Not the ones that, condos are harder because they have to bring something in.
Yeah.
That's not going to be as powerful. But the big machine out on the truck. And, but then we have to make sure the suction is actually working and that we don't have a bunch of holes in our vacuum cleaner hose, just because, they're vacuuming it out of here, but there's air coming in there and there and there. And suddenly the suction is compromised.
One register open so you can pull, or
only the one they're pulling from?
Just the one they're
yeah. Is there enough like little gaps and holes in the ducting that it's able to, because if you suck out of a plastic, if you put a suction over like a plastic enclosed tube, it won't suck because there's nowhere to pull from, right?
Right. Like if you did it on your skin, like you try to vacuum your skin.
Yeah. Using the natural holes in the knot do that.
The goal is to pull, I think there may be, I may have to check on the detail of that, but it definitely goes back into the furnace and everything else. And I think that you want to just isolate that you're cleaning the trunk that you're cleaning.
Yeah.
The line that you're cleaning. And then they go and do a different one and close that one and you do a different one.
Right.
Okay.
Are they perfect? I think rarely, because the other thing that I even talk about with preventing mold is duct sealing. So a lot of our ducts are very, very drafty, I would say, or like leaky.
Yeah.
And so that can be a way that we get mold in our ducts. And that can be a way when our HVAC systems are not efficient, because they're really taking, especially when they're going through the attics and they're leaky. So to your point, it's going to be pretty rare that they're perfect anyway.
Yeah. Right.
That you would create a vacuum. That's a little bit like doing a blower door test and saying, oh, should we do a blower door test? What if the walls fall in?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. It's pressurizing the inside of the house, but we have so many places in buildings that can leak that nature will figure it out.
Thanks for listening to the Mold Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth information on mold illness and recovery.